All right, we are counting down to the Union Budget and the Economic Survey 2025. The bottom line question remains, will the government prioritize middle class? At about 45.2% of the population of India, about 55% of the total income tax collections come from India's middle class. Moreover, at least 64% of the GST collections too come from individuals. With inflation remaining at about 5.2% above the RBI's target mark at 4%, India's middle class needs relief. Here are the 5 things the middle class will definitely expect. Long-awaited income tax reforms and relief, tackling inflation and making essentials more affordable, affordable housing and tax deductions on home loans and HRA, incentives for startups and MSMEs and job creation, and tax relief on education expenses and increased healthcare access as well. Let's talk about this with our guest. Joining us on the show is Dr. Jayajit Bhattacharya, President of CDEPR. Mithali Nikore, Senior Economist, also joins us on the show. Yogendra Kapoor, Senior Economist, is with us on the show as well. And Vinod Raval, Tax Expert, joins us on the show as well. Mr. Bhattacharya, of all, the wishes and aspirations I read out, what do you think is going to be on the top of the list for the Finance Minister? We have discussed many a times that some sort of a relief ought to come by now, considering that inflation, has been about fluctuating around 5 to 6%. It is not the ideal number.
Absolutely. I think you have put the hammer on the nail. If you look at what's ailing the economy, one of the key reasons why our growth has dipped is because our consumption has gone down. Our consumption has gone down because income levels are not going up, while inflation is eating into the purchasing capability of the people. Now, one of the mechanisms to actually revive the economy would be to put more money back in the hands of the consumers. And one of the ways to do that is basically reduce the tax rates. And that's exactly what the finance minister should be focusing on. I think it's almost kind of a given that this time she will focus on giving tax breaks. The point is basically in what manner will these tax breaks be given? Will it be by extending the 30% slab from 12 lakhs to 18 or 20, or increase the lower slabs to a higher level, and so on and so forth? Some kind of a permutation combination, but clearly more money needs to go into the hands of people who can spend, who will have a slightly more disposable income. And one very, very quick and easy way to do that is obviously reducing taxes. Having said that, it's also good for the overall economy because higher tax rates leads to tax evasion. And by reducing the tax rate, you're actually formalizing the economy even further. Regular citizens would like to pay taxes unless they are pushed to the wall, and they will be pushed to the wall if they don't have disposable incomes. And so it is good for the economy in multiple ways if the tax rates are brought down at this stage. Also, please keep in mind that for the last so many budgets that this finance minister has come out with, there has been very little relief for the tax-paying middle class. In fact, we have seen the taxes actually going up. And taxes are not just the direct tax that's coming in, but also taxes in the form of increasing inflation, in the form of right to education. Because if your child is going to the school and a economically challenged child is going to school, under right to education, your child's fees has to take care of the other child, and those are taxes. And therefore, that relief needs to come to the middle class.
Mithali, what do you think the economic survey is also, going to reveal in terms of where India stands at this point in time? And it's one aspect to basically have the 5 trillion vision. It's another aspect to be the third largest economy. And this is definitely going to be a very, very tacit balancing act for the government.
So absolutely, thanks a lot for bringing me into the discussion, and I fully agree with Dr. Jayajit that there have to be a number of forward-looking themes that we will start to see in the economic survey this year, because India is no longer just an emerging economy, a global south economy, a fledgling economy. Today, we are one of the economic leaders globally. And the actions that we take when it comes to setting up our own trade supply chains, when it comes to setting up our domestic economy for consumption and opening that up to global markets. Even yesterday there was a whole speculative news around custom duties, and how India is going to respond to the US and its sort of new re-engineering of supply chains across the world. So there is definitely scope, and there is definitely, I expect that the economic survey will speak about India's role in global supply chains in a much more expansive manner. How India can not only be a player but also be a leader in setting up these supply chains. And the second thing which I really expect the economic survey to talk about is the social sector, because every year we know that the economic survey is one instrument which always comments on the social sector, the education, and what kind of learning outcomes we are seeing. Just yesterday, the ASA survey, was released, which spoke about the fact that a number of teenagers in our country are using social media, but only a very small proportion out of them are using social media for educational purposes. And this is again a debate which is raging across the world. So I do think that the economic survey will have a lot on education, on skilling, on readying our workforce, not only for the Indian economy, but as a supplier to the global economy. Because India having the largest youth and having that demographic dividend which can serve the global economy has a responsibility to ready its youth to work across the world.
Okay, fair enough. One thing is obviously expected that this ought to be a populist budget. But Mr. Kapoor, can the government afford to be populist at this time? They were not populist during the election year.
Think that they need to be and should be populist so far as the middle class is concerned. Now, I would like to share the perception of the middle class as I have gauged over a period of time. They feel that they are the backbone of the working class of India. If we divide the respective classes, the belief is that the rich class, they get the preferential treatment from the government, whether it is with respect to lower taxes is concerned or higher amount of credit from banks or other institutions is concerned. When it comes to poor class, the belief is that they get away with freebies, and obviously they don't end up paying that amount of direct taxes which the middle class bears. Middle class always believes that it is the most ignored class by the government and the political parties across spectrum. So I think it is need of the hour that when the belief is that more money needs to get into the hands of the people in order to ensure that the consumption levels remain intact, which is very important for a growing economy like ours. So I think it is time that the government needs to be sensitive towards their concerns. And I'm sure that a relief is going to come in the form of either higher amount of deductions or the increase of the basic exemption limit or the reworking of the tax slabs.
All right. Mr. Sandeep Chachra, human rights defender, also with us on the program. Mr. Chachra, what are your expectations of this budget? Obviously, there is this huge class of people that always looks to this day for welfare schemes and improving their socio-economic status.
Well, thank you for having me here, Vinitji, and lovely to hear the previous comments as I was joining in. My first thing will be that populism is a necessity at this moment. It's not a choice, in my opinion. And my second point, just to sort of add to what Mr. Kapoor was saying, how about looking at budget as a working class budget, Mr. Kapoor and Vinitji? So whenever I join budget talks, it's always the middle classes which seem to be, whose interests seem to determine, and who are most vocal, as you know, about their interest in what the budget needs to be and what kind of SOPs, the reductions or the reliefs the budget needs to give to them. Of course, they have an important role historically, but the majorities of our country are working class people. I'm talking of workers, I'm talking of peasantry, I'm talking of farmers. So how about a budget which really is centered around the concerns of the working classes of India? So this is what I expect of the budget to begin with. Horses are horses, and let's see where it goes. But you're asking my expectations. You see, we are in a sticky situation. And that's why I said it's a compulsion, populism. And you just saw what's happening in Delhi election. Party after party is giving what is called by Mr. Kapoor earlier freebies. They are not. And they're welcome, actually, and because they are responding to a social need. But having said this, I personally feel that we are in a sticky situation. We've had the lowest GDP in the last that we've had in the last 4 years. We have high interest rates going. We have very headwinds of global uncertainties. Wars have been going on; they're not resolved. We don't know what tariff threats which are looming the world from US across, including on BRICS and including on India. What havoc it is playing, the increasing cost, the rising dollar means our exports have become even more expensive and tricky. So there is a problem. There is a problem which we need to respond to. FDI flows have been sluggish. We'll wait for the economic survey tomorrow. Consumption levels, as was pointed to by Mr. Kapoor, are nothing to boast about. I mean, globally, they remain extremely in a precarious situation, but even the marginal growths or the narrowing of gap between rural and urban consumption, I'm talking of per capita consumption, we'll wait till tomorrow to see what it is, but it is at precarious levels in any case. So under these situations, we certainly want a budget. I just want to also take a couple of minutes to point out, there's a recent survey by the Economic Times. This is a pre-budget survey, some random sample of 5,100 people. This survey tells us that these respondents, nearly about, I noted the figures somewhere, nearly around 51% thought that the biggest concerns, 51.9% or so, biggest concerns are jobs. And these are not working class people who surveyed only, the random sample. A lot of them thought infrastructure is important in order to create jobs and so on and so forth. A lot of them, which is about 30%, thought that, and about 4 or 5%, interestingly, talked of climate impacts, which is very interesting given that this survey was randomly done. So these remain, to my mind, this survey gives you a sense of what is there. And this is a budget, the first full budget after elections. So I think it needs to head in responding to in that direction. A big game changer would be, as was said earlier in this discussion, a big game changer would be to put resources in the hands of people. Now, what are these resources? First and foremost, the question of employment. So in some ways, we need to see both on-farm, off-farm, means for informal workers, a guaranteed employment. The Confederation of Indian Industry, which is a corporate setup, even that is asking for an national employment policy. And even that is now arguing, that body is now arguing for heightened investments into the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Program. I mean, one would want to say, and as human rights defenders, as social sector persons, as welfare sort of quote unquote persons, we are expected to say this, but even corporate bodies are saying this, which is interesting. We need to ensure a right to work for people. We need to ensure that people have year-round employment possibilities, whether through public-private partnerships, infrastructure development, or whether through direct employment creation methods, which the MGNREGA does, for instance, including expansion of MGNREGA from rural to urban areas, guarantees. Guarantees not just for 100 days, guarantees for year-round guarantees. And when you are not getting a job, you must get unemployment allowance. Yesterday, the Union Labour Minister convened a conference of all 36 labour ministers of all 36 states, including with the Labour Secretary, to resolve the impasse around the labour codes. Now, the labour codes, which include the Code on Wages, which includes the codes on Social Security, were passed 4 years ago. Remember that. But yet, they are not on the ground. I mean, one can sort of battle around who did what, but the fact is they don't meet the workers. They don't meet the workers, or the benefits don't meet the workers. In the meanwhile, about 30 crore workers have registered under the e-Shram portal, the database of informal workers of this country. But no substantive benefits by the way of Social Security, aside from the existing schemes, the Ayushman Bharat scheme, the Jeevan Bima Yojana, the Pradhan Mantri Mandhan, Shramik Mandhan Yojana, those are always there, were there. They need to be expanded. But I do argue that a comprehensive, universal, substantive, and dignified social security system needs to be set up. I hope this meeting was talking about that, an employment mechanism which goes beyond MGNREGA, which goes beyond urban employment guarantee, to create dignified employment, to give unemployment allowance. So I think that's a big game changer to me. I want to come to a couple of more points, if you allow me, Vinitji, in a hurry. I think the other bit is to look at you've had the Yuva framing. You had the question of the worker framing, the young framing, the urban framing, and so on and so forth. But I think the question of women, with reference to our women's workforce participation increased marginally over these years, 4 or 5 years, but it remains extremely depressed. It's extremely low by global standards even. I think that needs to be boosted, and that can be boosted in many, many ways. Some we won't have the time. There are expectations to boost it in the budget through direct financial instruments to create women's employment sort of possibilities. Now, that can come in both on-farm and off-farm sectors. The Ministry of Cooperatives, for instance, has an interesting program whose budget outlays I would expect would be enhanced substantively. The interesting program of farmer producer organizations and promoting cooperatives. Now, that's a game changer because it provides to daily wagers a dignified, sustainable livelihoods, mostly women. So, not just in the farming sector, but let's say in the gig economy, let's say in transport work, let's say in construction work. So, cooperatives of workers themselves assure dignified and equitable distribution of resources. And I think that amount of allocation, that huge allocation, I would expect substantive game changer that will create for women's workforce participation, but also for the entire peasant and informal sector of this country. I'll come to the question of climate and then end with the final point. On climate, we have this whole, sort of intense on the ground, not just impact, but loss and damage, which workers, which farming families, which pastoralists, which tribals suffer. And I think this, we do expect a budget line on climate loss and damage compensation. We have been arguing long from the ground that a compensation framework, globally it may have been agreed, but it needs to find home here to compensate losses and damages of livelihoods, of work, of incomes, of health, of habitats that people suffer on account of climate-related impacts. So to compensate that, resources need to be devolved, not just for disaster risk response, but also for direct compensation. But likewise, an interesting departure point would be to recognize, which the previous budgets hinted to, recognize people who defend ecologies, who defend our forests, who defend our water bodies, who defend our pasture lands, the pastoralists, the small fisher folk, the tribals of India, the forest dwellers of India, the sustainable farmers of India, and an incentive by the way of financial support for ecological valuation of systems and services would be a game changer for sustainable development. So I think I would see this in terms of revenues. Well, tax the rich, tax the wealthy, introduce a wealth tax, and let's give budget relief to the lower middle classes and the working classes. They pay a lot of taxes, I want to say, through what is called VATs and other things, through GSTs and other things, and their contribution of tax, their tax burden on them in proportion to the incomes, one would argue, is much higher. So give relief to them to the working classes of India, tax the wealthier or the accumulating classes of India. The inequalities are jumping, and let's not get too carried away by this bogey of financial discipline. We have a fiscal glide path. We are to get to 4.5%, and for the Honorable Finance Minister of India, it's going to be a really tricky situation. How to stick to that glide path, how to get to 4.5% target in a situation which is as volatile as the one I was trying to say, including of the global headwinds. Thank you, Vinitji.
All right, Mr. Chachra, thank you for those pointers. Important facets that you have brought out. Mr. Vinod Raval, tax is always something that the middle class is hoping to be reduced. Is that the year? Is this the year for them to celebrate that?
Good evening, Vinitji. Thank you very much for keeping me in the debate. Actually, 76% of the middle class contributes to the exchequer and 24% corporates. The budget is read by two people. One class is the middle class, which reads the budget as incentives, as a soaps to the tax rates, benefits from the rural housing sector, benefits on the other fronts, and the corporate reads the budgets on other lines, which kinds of schemes are there on which new industries, new infrastructure can be planted by them, and they can plan their new businesses in the year to come. So the budget class is looking that, middle class is looking at the budget with the benefits and incentives only. The thing is, now it is high time, because with the change in tax regime, new and old, now there is nothing left in the new regime to take the benefit out of it. So earlier also, the housing has been left out, the benefit has taken away, lots of other benefits has been taken away. Now, Institute of Chartered Accountants have also recommended to make another class of married filing jointly. So they get the benefit, at least the family gets the benefits, because the family runs the home. They need more expenses. And moreover, everybody is contributing to the tax. Sandeep ji, I will just add to your lines that there is no one in this country who doesn't contribute to the exchequer. More than 20 lakh crore is coming out of GST, which is also part of the income which he has received after paying the taxes. So first of all, he is paying 30% taxes, then after that he is paying GST on that. So my expectation from this budget as a middle class, for a middle class, is relief in tax rates, at least basic exemption limit or the joint exemption limit to be created for them, for the family, plus the GST rates for the basic items, the essential items, the food items, it should be taken away. At least now it is high time to come for roti, kapda or makan. So you have to think for the food items, at least they should be made GST tax free. I know this is not a platform for, this budget is not for giving reliefs on GST rates, but at least recommendations can go. The government is very much in that position. So there are situations now for the indirect taxes also, wherever they are getting more indirect taxes, the only middle class is contributing to that. So they are putting the money from both hands. First they pay direct taxes and then they pay indirect taxes. So now it is high time. I will agree with the whole panel that this time we are expecting a populist budget. Maybe it's a sticky situation for the finance minister, no doubt about it. It's a tricky for them to balance all the things, because on 1st of February the budget is being coming, and on 5th of February the Delhi elections are there. So they have to combat with the freebies, revadi, whatever you call. So this all competition which is going on in Delhi. So within 3 days, how you will be tackling those situations, that Delhi going that which way? It should not go the way the UP went in earlier parliamentary elections. So now it is high time to take care of them. So at least you get the benefit of Delhi. I will be, being a biased middle class person, I will think on those ways that we are the contributors. Now this is high time, because every time the middle class doesn't get that his cut, he doesn't get his pie, he is always more taxed. I agree with Sandeep ji, now this is high time to put the wealth tax, it is high time to put the inheritance tax wherever you feel comfortable. Now this is the time to tax the wealthier, there is no issue at all, because they have started contributing lesser. If you really compare the last year data, now the middle class has surpassed the corporate. And this has happened for the first time in this country. And thus now it is time to get the taxes from the corporates also. They have given the much benefits by reducing the tax rates, by giving the other incentives and all. And now this is high time that they are also taken care of, because they are also, as they are the driving force. You have to increase the consumption market. Once the consumption market, only middle class person gets, because the rich people does the shopping the different way. All these essential items, 76% contributions, both ways you can find.
All right, so we've run out of time, but nevertheless, I appreciate everybody who joined us. This is obviously going to be a lead up to that big day on the 1st of Feb when the budget is going to be announced. Thank you so much, everyone.